They didn't pull up slow or curious. They came in hot tires, throwing gravel doors flying open like I'd already been convicted. And before I could even turn my head, someone was yelling at me to get on the ground. Guns pointed, no questions, no pause, just that look on their faces like they'd finally found what they were hoping for. I remember thinking, yeah, here we go again. I pressed my cheek against the hood of my own truck, felt a knee grind into my back, and quietly spoke into my watch. Authorization code confirmed, initiate protocol. I didn't feel scared. I felt tired. That's how you know something like this isn't new. My name's Marcus. At least, that's the name they knew. To them, I was just another black guy from out of town who somehow bought land he wasn't supposed to have. 50 acres outside Ridgway Falls, a place most people drive past without noticing. To me, that land wasn't just property. It was history. It was unfinished business. And yeah, it was bait. I grew up hearing stories about Ridgway Falls like they were campfire warnings. My father used to talk about it the way people talk about storms. Low voice eyes somewhere else. 30 years ago, he worked there, pushed back against some zoning nonsense, tried to do everything the right way. They planted drugs in his car, locked him up, took 8 years of his life, and when he came out, the man I knew was already half gone. So when the Bureau asked for someone to go in quiet pose as a developer, watch the local department from the inside, I said yes before they finished the sentence. Professional curiosity, sure. But let's not pretend it wasn't personal, you know what I mean? I'd only been in town 4 days when I realized just how much I didn't belong, at least in their eyes. Conversation stopped when I walked into the diner. A waitress served 3 people who came in after me before she even looked my way. The guy at the hardware store followed me so close I could feel his breath when I stopped to read labels. My neighbor Carl Whitman spent hours on his porch cleaning the same rifle like it was a ritual. Never firing it, just making sure I saw it. The first night I laughed it off. The second night I checked my locks. The third night I walked the property line and found the cameras. Not cheap trail cams, not hobby stuff. Real equipment hidden in trees disguised as birdhouses pointed straight at my land. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about race, though. Race was the doorway. This was about land money and control. The morning it all went sideways, I was documenting one of those cameras when I heard engines rev hard way too fast for a casual visit. 3 cruisers came down the gravel road like they were late to a fire. The lead officer jumped out already shouting. His name was Kessler. Big guy, crew-cut eyes flat like he'd practiced not seeing people. Behind him was a younger officer, Ethan, hands shaking just enough to tell he hadn't done this long enough to stop feeling it. And then there was Lieutenant Pike, calm, polished, smiling like he'd already decided how this would end. I told them I owned the land. I told them the paperwork was in my truck. Pike nodded like he heard me, then said they'd received a trespassing call from the property owner. Kessler laughed and said, funny how that works. They never checked the paperwork. They checked me. They cuffed me hard, tighter than necessary, little punishments stacked on top of each other. Kessler went through my truck, tossing things aside, and when he held up a small plastic bag with white powder, he looked almost proud, like he'd found buried treasure. I felt my stomach drop, not from fear, but from recognition. Same trick, different decade. Pike leaned in close and whispered that I'd picked the wrong town to play rich man. I looked past them and saw a small crowd forming, neighbors standing just far enough away to pretend they weren't involved. That's when I saw her, a woman near the tree line, holding up her phone, recording everything, her face set like she wasn't about to look away. That mattered more than she probably knew. They took me to the station in silence. Old brick building, flickering lights, the kind of place that smells like paper and old coffee. They booked me slow, fingerprints pressed too hard. Questions asked twice like they wanted me to slip. In the interrogation room, Pike leaned back, crossed his arms, and asked how a guy like me could afford land like that. I didn't answer. I let the recorder do its job. I let them talk. Eventually, Ethan came in with a cup of water. As he set it down, his fingers brushed mine and he left a folded note behind. It said, "They're lying. Your prints flagged something. The chief is freaking out. Hold on." I didn't look up, but inside something shifted. That small crack in the wall, that's all it takes sometimes. 10 minutes later, the whole building changed. Raised voices, doors opening too fast, and then she walked in. Director Morales, federal badge out, voice calm, not loud, just certain. She asked where Special Agent Marcus Hale was being detained. The room froze. Pike's smile vanished. Kessler went pale. They brought me out still cuffed, and Morales looked at the marks on my wrists like she was committing them to memory. She told them to remove the cuffs. Now. And just like that, the air changed. I gave my real name, my badge number. I told them how long we'd been watching Ridgway Falls, how the planted drugs, the illegal searches, the threats were already documented. The chief sat down like the weight finally caught up with him. Over the next hour, agents filled the station, computers were seized, officers separated, and stories started spilling out because silence only protects you until it doesn't. What we uncovered was bigger than one arrest, bigger than racism alone. Ridgway Falls had been running a quiet land grab for years. Target certain families, harass them, arrest them on fabricated charges, seize property, sell it cheap to shell companies tied back to the mayor's office. My land sat right in the middle of their next big development. That was the real problem, me standing in the way. Ethan flipped that night, told us about shredded files, closed-door meetings, threats already being made. He said he joined to protect people, not scare them off their own land. Yeah, that happened. They didn't stop just because the FBI showed up. My property was vandalized, slurs spray-painted, equipment destroyed. A warning hung from a tree. But desperation makes people sloppy. We caught Pike and Kessler on audio talking about making accidents happen. That moved things fast. The final move was simple. I announced plans to build affordable housing on my land. It worked like lighting a fuse. They met. All of them. Mayor, Judge, Pike, Kessler. And Ethan wore a wire. When we walked in with warrants, the looks on their faces weren't anger. They were disbelief. Like the rules had betrayed them. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom watching verdicts come down. Guilty. Every one of them. When they read the memo tying the mayor to my father's arrest decades earlier, my hands shook for the first time in years. Justice doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like grief finally being acknowledged. My father's name was cleared. Others too. I stayed in Ridgway Falls. Built what I said I would. Housing, a community center, something that couldn't be taken so easily. And here's where people argue. Some say I should have left, taken the win and moved on. Others say staying was the real justice. So I want to know what you think. If you were in my place, would you trust a system that failed you to finally do the right thing? Or would you walk away and never look back? Drop your thoughts below. Was this justice? Or did it only work because the right person had the right badge? And how many people never get that badge but still deserve the same ending?